For more analysis, let's turn to Gregory Kroger. He is a professor and chair of the Department of Political Science at the University of Miami. Professor, we just heard this story about immigration, but with 1 week to go, what would you say is the one biggest issue at the top of U.S. voters' minds?
Actually, polls asking that question suggest democracy is the #1 issue. That correlates a lot with whether or not the respondent is a Democrat. I think Democrats are very worried about the future health of American democracy. Other major issues, of course, include the economy, especially the high rate of inflation, the border, as you discussed, and access to abortion.
Well, we know the issue of abortion gained a lot of momentum over the summer. But do you think it will be enough to sway some of the races, some of the tight races that we're seeing across the country?
So polls suggested that the Democrats did pick up a lot of support after the Dobbs decision came out in June. But in recent weeks, it seems that a lot of the undecided voters have returned to what they probably would have done anyways, which is, lean towards the Republican Party, given their party affiliation and the fact that this is a midterm election environment that would tend to favor Republicans. So I do think that the issue of abortion did help the Democrats, did energize a lot of people to support the Democrats and turn out to vote. But I think that's already been incorporated into the polls that are out there.
Is there a messaging issue, would you say, by the Democrats?
I think there's a messaging issue on two fronts. One is the sheer volume. I'm in Miami, and there are some hotly contested races in the state, and most of the advertising I see is pro-Republican. And what I read of Senate races from around the country suggests that the volume of Republican advertising is much heavier than the volume of Democratic advertising. And then the Republican message is fairly simple. Inflation is bad and it's Biden's fault. And whereas the Democratic message is a little bit more obscure. It's hard to know exactly what it is that Democrats are campaigning on. They do tend to mention abortion and make that a central part of their mission, but it's hard to say on any given issue exactly what the Democratic position is.
Well, how much can actually change between now and next week? Could we see any surprise outcomes, or do you think that the races, even the tight ones, are pretty set right now?
I think a lot of voters' minds are made up. A lot of voters have actually already cast their votes. There's early voting and mail-in balloting going in across the country. I myself have already voted. So I do think that a lot of the contest has already happened. That doesn't mean that we can't be surprised, right? The polls that we have up to this point may be incorrect. We may be surprised in terms of the outcome. But I don't know that there's a lot of voters waiting to make up their minds at this point.
And we have about 30 seconds left, Gregory. You mentioned that the Republicans are somewhat favored to win this midterm election cycle. The party not in the White House gains more congressional seats. Do you see that as the case this time around?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the other major factors that political scientists note are the presidential approval ratings, which for Joe Biden over in the low 40s, 40% approval, and the state of the economy, especially the real disposable income, how much money people have in their pockets, and inflation cuts against that quite a bit. So just based on the overall the environment, the fact that it's a midterm, the fact that the president is not extremely popular and the economy's a little shaky, the expectation is the Democrats would lose seats. So to the extent that they still are fairly competitive to hold on to the House and perhaps gain seats in the Senate, they're actually doing better than we otherwise would have expected.
All right, Professor Gregory Kroger, thank you so much for joining us from Miami.